You're watching TBPN live from the shrine of shareholder value, the dojo of the dollar, the capital of capital. It is Tuesday, February 25th, 2025, and this show starts now. We got a great show for you guys today. We're talking about AI sweatshops. We're talking about the stock market crumbling. We're talking about Anthropic raising billions of dollars and many more. We have tons of stories. I hope we can get to all of them because there's a ton here. But first up, Jordy, what's going on? How are you doing today?
John, your intros get better every single time. It's incredible to watch. So I would be in the studio today, but I had a little bit of a fire drill this morning, about 15 minutes before my 8 sleep was scheduled to buzz me awake. I hear my son open his door. Like he's not very gentle with the door in the morning, so he just always like slams it. He yells something. And I like come out, I find him like he had made it to the kitchen. He's just kind of like stumbling around because it's dark. And he like can barely speak, like in a very concerning way. And he's just saying like, I swallowed a glow stick. Like, and I was just like, at this point, like I'm actually like very concerned because he can't talk at all. He's like clearly struggling to breathe and keeps saying that he swallowed a glow stick. And so anyways, we're like freaking out. I'm not freaking out, but of course my wife is. And call 911, get them over, and end up having to go in an ambulance because he's not like breathing properly. And we get all the way there. Fortunately, he didn't swallow a glow stick, but he had this thing called croup, which is like when a kid's esophagus like sort of swells up or gets inflammation. Which I had never heard of, and it's actually good to be aware of because, I somehow had never heard the term or was aware of it. But the funniest part is by like I think like 8 or 9 a.m. we were ready to go home. They gave him like a steroid treatment or whatever, and he was back to breathing normally. And he was like genuinely like pissed that we couldn't ride in the ambulance back home. It was like for him, like a kid, you wake up. You get to hang with your dad all morning. Yeah. You get to ride in an ambulance. There's firemen all around. It's like for him, it's like the best day ever. So, anyways, but good to be aware of croup for those parents and future parents. But there was a lot of news. There was a lot of news this morning, as there always is, seemingly. So I'm excited to get into it.
Yeah. So yesterday, Y Combinator announced a new startup, Optify. And they posted a video. They've been doing this thing, launch videos. Some of them have been, amazing. Everyone's loved them. Some of them have been. We went over the maritime fusion company that people were saying, oh, hard tech, like this will never work. And we kind of defended that one. This one was a little bit rougher. The production value wasn't quite at the level of the amazing CGI in that maritime fusion video. And the response was pretty negative almost immediately. I have a bunch of tactical ideas for how they could have done better. We'll go to a couple posts here. Gabe, people are just memeing this already. Gabe says, absolutely sickening, revolting. Imagine how many sweatshop overseers will lose their jobs because of this. And then Peter comes in and kind of defends this. He says, the people dunking on this are idiots. This is literally scientific management that Frederick Winslow Taylor, Deming, and even Ford implemented more than 100 years ago, but with line foremen. This is what makes Amazon warehouses and delivery trucks performant and what Foxconn uses to make your iPhones grow up. And that was my question. I was texting some people that work on factories, and I was like, I get the pushback. Like the aesthetics were very bad. Like the launch video was like not empathetic. It didn't tell like a great story. But like, let's be honest. Like you really expect me to believe that China is ahead of America in manufacturing. We don't monitor the output of our factory workers in America, and somehow we're going to win if we don't do that. Like it didn't make sense. Like we couldn't really track all that. And so my take was, I would have redone this video and instead focused on robotics instead of people and said, hey, look, there's going to be a lot of robotics in these factories and we want to understand what's happening on the lines. And then instead of it being, so the video shows a negative scenario, someone who's underperforming. I would rather have it highlight someone who's a high performer. And because that's a more positive story. And then if you have to show something that's negative, show something that isn't that is fixable. And so there's
Yeah,
a
not somebody
robot.
that's like losing their job. Like
Exactly. So
clearly,
imagine
yeah,
there's a robot on like, it was like aisle 17 or something, like work unit 17. They're underperforming. You use their software to check on it. Oh, turns out his wheels are squeaky or something. You go
yep,
put some oil in the joint and he's back and he's happy and the robot's happy and everyone's happy. And
yeah.
it's this very like almost Pixar-esque moment. And that could have been really cool and positive. Instead, it really did just look like these guys on their laptops are now overseeing people that are working really hard in a
Yeah.
factory and then just like firing them. So what was your take on it? How do you think this went? How do you think they could have done better?
Look, I think the product makes a lot of sense. There's clearly an opportunity for this. You can see the value. You can see the value also, from my view, for teams, right?
Yeah.
If you're working on a factory floor, factory line, there it requires really close coordination, even if you're just focused on a very specific lane. And so my big issues with it was the sort of poor acting. Like they're clearly not actors, they're founders. They shouldn't have been trying to like make this sort of like skit like scenario to demo their product. It just set them up to be very easily dunked on. And then generally, like I would have focused it more around like this sort of empowering of like how are we going to empower like teams at these factories to increase output and hit their goals at sort of like the factory level
Yeah.
versus focusing in like, of course, like I think what you're saying is right. Show three people performing, adequately, two people overperforming, and then show one or two people underperforming. And like there's so many ways to position that are more like oriented around like how do we win as a team
Yep.
versus like this sort of slave driver kind of like
Exactly.
approach of
Exactly.
saying like you're underperforming, you've had a
Yeah.
bad day, bad hour, bad month.
Yeah.
And anyways, just the other thing is it's very hard. I looked it up, and these guys are based in India.
Sure.
It's very hard to sort of understand how this might be received really well in
Yep.
India, yet you push it out to this like predominantly sort of American or international audience, and it just falls
Yeah.
flat. And to be honest, like the meme potential of this was just amazing.
It
Like
was insane.
the
Yeah.
shot of the guy like on the phone,
The
and then
acting
I
was very
posted
funny.
I posted the
Yeah.
the George Bush one saying like, sir, workspace 17 is,
It's
is
underperforming.
underperforming. So anyways, rough day. YC deleted it. I think they should have doubled down. It's not, again, they also could have used, there's so many things they could have done differently. They
Yeah.
could have made it feel more futuristic, to be honest.
Totally.
In many
Totally.
ways, it felt like SaaS out of the, it didn't necessarily, I'm sure that AI enables what they're doing,
Yeah.
to maybe build it with like a smaller team.
Yeah.
But ultimately, there was just so many issues with it. And I don't know. I think that you can hold two things. Like, yes, they kind of set themselves up to get dunked on, but at the same time, there's like 20 things they could have done better.
Yeah. Like this type of software has to exist in factories all over the world already.
Yeah.
And I refuse to believe that there are major factories churning out iPhones where they don't know what's happening in unit 17 or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, should have been a lot more optimistic. It gets to this idea that, we've been seeing in the news with Elon sending out those Doge emails. What did you get
Yeah.
done this week? It's like the famous, like his interaction with Parag Agrawal when he took over Twitter. What did you get done this week? That became
Yeah.
became his like calling card. And I think that's been
Yeah.
received with very mixed results. Like some people love it. They're like, yeah, like everyone in the government should be able to say what they did this week. But what I think would make it a little bit more empathetic of a message would be if Elon also answered that question and
Yeah.
Trump also answered that question. Because right
Totally
now,
true.
people are doing that with, we're going to talk about Tesla later. People are like, oh, what did you get done this week? As soon as the stock falls or whatever. And realistically, like
Yeah.
Elon probably did a lot of stuff. And that would be cool. And I think there's something about like leading from the front
Yeah.
there that says that just messages it differently. There is something about the American worker in the factory. Have you seen American Factory, that Obama documentary that went on Netflix?
No, but
It's
I
fascinating.
wonder if there's anything in what's that show that people brought up a couple weeks ago about how it's made, something along
Oh
those
yeah,
lines.
yeah, yeah. So how
Yeah.
it's made doesn't show any humans. It only shows the machinery, typically.
Yeah.
I mean, occasionally you'll see like the guy loads the machine or whatever, but
Yeah.
it's not focused on the human stories of people working in the factory. American factory was very different in the sense that I think it was a glass manufacturing. They make like windshields and all sorts of different custom glass installations. And and this particular manufacturing company was bought by a Chinese company. And so they kind of brought over the Chinese management processes. And in there are a bunch of really funny quotes about the Chinese managers coming in and saying like, in America, the American worker is like a donkey. Like you need to pet it with the fur going this way. You can't pet it against the fur. And so like American
That's
workers
amazing.
respond to positive reinforcement, not negative reinforcement. And I don't know, maybe that's our culture. I think American culture is pretty great. Maybe that's a flaw, but
the reality
I think
is,
you got to play the game on the field, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, go and I don't think Europeans would respond well to optimize. I don't even know how to say the name of the YC company, but yeah, different continents, countries have like very distinct work cultures, and that's totally okay, right? A lot of the approach of this sort of like Manhattan finance culture would go over terrible in San Francisco, right? This idea, in San Francisco, you're supposed to get a pat on the back, maybe if you're doing like 996. Oftentimes in New York, that's not even going to be like the bar, right? You're going to be like looked down upon for doing that and like might lose your job over it. So these sort of workplace cultural differences are very real. And I just don't think that, so this company, the annoying thing is I don't know how beneficial a YC hard post launch is going to be for them. Whereas
it's for fundraising, right?
Yeah.
It's saying, hey, here's this demo. A bunch of people can see it, even if they didn't make it to demo day, even if they got lost in the clutter of demo day, because there's a lot of companies now. And I think that's what those posts are for. Maybe hiring a little bit, but certainly not customer focused. But yeah, it's got to go over well. But who knows? We'll see. We'll be able to track them and see if they make see if they raise a seed round. And I think that there's already a poly market out there for will they pivot away from this or will they change? But I don't know. I mean, getting attention can be turned into a lot of different positive things if you work hard. And speaking of getting attention, if you want to launch your company, why don't you launch an AdQuick billboard? There's a fantastic post here. Chris from AdQuick reposted it. Out-of-home advertising made easy and measurable. Say goodbye to the headaches of out-of-home advertising with AdQuick. Go to adquick.com. And there's a new billboard just dropped with Michael J. Fox for Calvin Klein. And just an iconic image. And I'm sure that built the Calvin Klein brand wonderfully. And so sometimes simple aspirational is all you need.
I just had an idea. We should take some of our favorite reviews that include ads in them and run those as billboards.
I love that.
So we get some TV placement and then you get the actual ads under there. So we got to talk to.
I mean, they do that for movies now, right? Like it'll be like 5 stars, and they have like they won the Palme d'Or. It's the best picture of the year. And what the critics are saying. The critics say this. We need to run that for us, but it's what the critics are saying plus the ads that our listeners have dumped into the reviews. Anyway, let's move on to Anthropic. Claude is playing Pokemon on Twitch right now. I saw about 1,000 people tuning in. Very fun. Guys, wake up, says Near. Claude's playing Pokemon on Twitch. It's happening. And so let me get to that.
And so they did this and they simultaneously announced a new $3.5 billion fundraise. Is that correct?
No, I don't think they have announced that. I think the fundraising round is leaking currently.
Got it.
And they are finalizing the round. We can get into that. This has actually been done before. There's been a Twitch Plays Pokemon where the computer would just read the chat and everyone would spam up or A or B, and then whatever letter was spammed the most was basically won the vote, and then that would be the next move that the player made, and it takes forever, and you can get stuck in crazy scenarios. And I think when Twitch played Pokemon, there's this one level where if you press down, you fall down this like crack and you have to basically start over this whole maze, and people would come in and troll, and so they spent like, I think days, maybe hours, just trying to get through this one thing that's like pretty easy to navigate if you're just a human player, but it's very chaotic. And so then people would troll and be like, oh, like, you know, instead of let's attack, let's just run away from this bad guy, or let's waste all of our things.
Video games by committee, probably not a good strategy.
But people had a lot of fun. It's a lesson in democracy, right? And so now there are benchmarks around this.
Are people having fun with democracy?
Yeah, exactly. And so Zeophon says, we got cool benches. and it's Claude 3 versus 3.5 versus 3.5 Sonnet new versus 3.7 Sonnet. And it says milestone reach number of actions. And it shows how do you progress through the game. I've actually been playing Pokemon with my son because of the mod Retro Chromatic. He actually finds it kind of boring. He's not that into it. He likes the other games, but it's pretty cool. The Chromatic, you can get, I got one card that has like 100 games on it, and then you can just like play whatever you want. So he always wants to play something new.
So great.
But it's fun.
Can you imagine if we had that? Can you imagine if we had that when we were kids? Like I distinctly remember you had your Game Boy, which you'd be cruising around with, and then I would have like a DOP kit, shave kit that just had a bunch of cartridges.
Yeah, and you would have to save up. You know, games were like $50. You'd save for like 3 months to get enough money to buy one. And now it's like, oh yeah, just download them all for free. We live in the era of abundance. AI, we are post-scarcity in terms of video games.
That is correct.
Well, let's go to Vittorio. He kind of sums things up. The timeline in the span of 3 days, people moved from OpenAI to Anthropic, or to Grok, and then from Grok to Anthropic to Claude. Everyone is always obsessed with a new shiny object in AI. Especially online, especially in X, everyone is always focused on the evals, focused on the latest and greatest models. People care about this stuff. But again, like what's happening on the street, what's happening with the average person is what actually drives revenue at these companies. And we'll get into what's going on at Anthropic eventually, but
there's this effect right now where there's, in the same, the critique of the whole Uber versus Lyft battle was that Uber was like obviously the winner. And by both companies being able to raise billions of dollars, there was a bunch of capital incineration, and Uber wasn't really able to recognize, able to see the real value of the traction they had because prices were very compressed. And the same thing is happening right now, but it's actually much more deserving in many ways because we don't know how all these consumer products are going to shake out yet. We want a lot of competition, and I actually think that it's great for consumers because you can go on Grok and get free intelligence that a couple weeks ago you had to go to OpenAI and pay money or go to DeepSeek, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I think it's great for consumers, and it's totally unsustainable. We're not going to have every consumer's not going to have like 20 different LLM.
The fragmentation's unsustainable, but I think the pricing will come down to the point where it is too cheap to meter. I think these models will get baked down. Dylan Patel was talking about this, how already there are GPT-4 level models that have been baked down to the phone. And so, there's, he doesn't even need OpenAI to open source that already because it is available and the optimizations are happening, which is a lot of fun. Anyway, let's move on to Chuje Jang, who says, "Are you kidding me, dude?" Talking about Claude. How many R's are in strawberry with a bunch of R's? This is like a classic, tricky prompt for these LLMs because they tokenize the words and they struggle to count letters, I guess. And it's hilarious because Claude recognizes that this is a trick prompt and says, this appears to be an Easter egg prompt. The instructions specifically mention Easter egg. If the human asks how many R's are in the word strawberry, Claude says, let me check, and creates an interactive mobile-friendly React artifact that counts the letter R's in a fun and engaging way. And so it doesn't just count the letters, it actually creates a whole website interface for you. It codes all of that up and it still gets it wrong, which is hilarious.
This is rough. The reason that this is particularly rough is that they clearly were like, we're not going to get here.
Yeah, exactly.
And so they went and they used humans to try to inject themselves and make the model get it right, and then still getting it wrong. It's
so funny.
Of course, the top comment is
Eliezer, I'm cackling.
Eliezer.
Yeah, Claude is in an odd place. I mean, we'll go through this with Evan Armstrong's post, but simultaneously, like a lot of people have a very strong affinity for Claude as a personality. Like they like
Yeah.
talking to it. They think it's friendly and interesting, and they
Yeah.
like they like the way it sounds that when they talk to it. But then simultaneously on the other side, it's like it seems to be like the best programming model, and
Yep.
and that's like completely utilitarian. You don't really care about the personality of the
Yep.
LLM. And so they're clearly, finding little pockets of value here and there, but
Isn't
Evan
that
Armstrong
isn't that
sums it up.
fascinating? Isn't it just fascinating the way it's evolving? Because it
Yeah.
almost seems like it sort of feels like it's not fully in their control. Like that's like
Yeah.
like there's a feeling of like, yeah, Anthropic was like, hey, we want our model to be like you can imagine them being very intentional about we want our model to be sort of more fun, friendly, like more of like a companion,
Hmm.
you can develop like a relationship with it, whatever. But then do they have an off switch for that? Is there a way to make it go like, sort of Claude hardcore where you just want to have this sort of like, more simplified, linear, just direct relationship with the LLM? Because
Yeah.
I haven't experienced that as a
I mean, there's
user.
tons of different
And
ways to
maybe
do
you
it.
could prompt engineer
Yeah.
it to
Yeah. Yeah.
to
I
to
mean,
do it.
prompt engineering is one way. There's post training. Even the data that goes into the pre training, a lot of the reason that the early models were like quote unquote woke was because
Yeah.
they were trained more on Reddit and they kind of excluded 4chan. And so you have like a more left wing perspective. And then just the internet broadly leans younger and leans more left wing. And so you wind
Yeah.
up with creating the average of that and you get kind of more of a left wing viewpoint. And then obviously XAI has kind of gone the other direction with mixed results, honestly, because it is a little bit of like you're trying to, tame a wild dragon or something. And like you
Yeah.
don't really have fine grained control. It's not just a slider.
Yeah.
There's a lot that goes into
Yeah.
actually, evaluating these models and creating something that is really,
Yeah, and it
really
makes it one thing
aligned.
one thing that seems obvious about where we're headed with all of these apps is that you will be able to have like maybe like a 4 quadrant sort of graphic where you can drag it up. It's like, do you want it to be more short and
Yep.
direct versus, because think about it,
Yep.
uh, when you're working with people in a professional environment, which a lot of these people, a lot of users are using them, these products professionally. Sometimes you want somebody who's just super direct, like
Yep.
doesn't want to be your best friend, just
Yep.
wants to do the work and get it done. And then sometimes you want
Yeah.
somebody to just talk to, right?
Yeah, you can actually do that in OpenAI in the ChatGPT app. There's a basically like a prompt that is like a permanent prompt where you can type
Interesting.
in.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can fill in a ton of text. You can say all sorts of things, and people kind of trade like these. Oh, this is like the best prompt. You got to tell it to do all these different
Yeah.
things, and then the model updates, and you kind of don't need to do that anymore. But you can actually bake in, those preferences, and then it'll just come through on every single prompt
Yeah.
that you ask. Let's go to Evan Armstrong. He says, Anthropic is in a tough spot. OpenAI has 50x the brand and customer distribution. XAI has this platform captured. Google has an infinite money glitch going for them. How can they win? Good old-fashioned marketing. They need to counterposition, make everything less creepy than the OpenAI robot god energy. This recent launch is a perfect example of their more human strategy. Handheld shot versus the creepy Steadicam that makes everything feel like a webinar. A nice warm yellow-orange color correction on the vids. Its videos will go with fun jazz or lo-fi beats that fills out the demos. No thinking about how the tools will take your job, lol. Intros that humanize the presenters with no C-suite trumpeting accomplishments, just normal sounding team members. Most importantly, the models feel more soulful and are trained to have a softer, more human-like response to user queries. Yeah, so finding a little pocket of differentiation is really, really key. I was laughing about, Google has this infinite money glitch. I was looking up Apple. Apple has returned, they've returned $928 billion to shareholders over the last 12 years or something like that. And they have, I think, $65 billion on their balance sheet. So they basically generated $1 trillion in cash for their shareholders. And you think about like, what does $1 trillion get you in the AI race? Like, it's like clearly the best and like well beyond anything else. But they just didn't go down that fork in the tech tree. And so they just
Yeah.
didn't pursue that. And I think the strategy will honestly probably work out, because they're just going
Yeah.
to act as the portal and take a toll
The
on
toll.
everything that happens.
Yeah.
And they're happy with that, and they haven't had to duke it out in this game
Yeah.
and put all that capital at risk. Instead, they've been able to return it to shareholders.
Yeah.
But it is very interesting, and these models are expensive, and that's why Anthropic is finalizing a $3.5 billion funding round. And so the company behind Claude chatbot is valued at $61.5 billion after overcoming investor fear sparked by the success of China's DeepSeek. Investors are eager to back the promising artificial intelligence companies despite the disruptive arrival of DeepSeek. They initially set out to raise $2 billion, but they were able to increase that amount during talks with investors. Anthropic, such a young company, founded in 2021 by former OpenAI employees. Startup was previously valued at $18 billion and considered one of the few AI startups with enough talent and funding to
And to
compete with
give
OpenAI.
SBF some credit,
Yeah.
I believe they definitely invested sub $10 billion. And that was from the FTX balance sheet investment, which is wild.
Yeah, and so I think that's part of what will wind up making the FTX depositors whole. Like if you lost money in FTX, you now have a stake on a small slice of Anthropic, and if they can liquidate that at some point, that's a really good return. I don't know exactly how much money is missing or how the math works out, but it is one of those weird narrative violations that it was highly illiquid, but potentially profitable. So who's in this round? It's Lightspeed Venture Partners, General Catalyst, Bessemer, Abu Dhabi, MGX is also in talks to participate, and I believe MGX was going into Stargate too. Is that right? Everyone's in everything. I'm very. Everyone needs a slice of everything.
Everybody's getting conflicted.
Anthropic trails.
There's no worse feeling for a VC than having their a massive market map appear and you're not conflicted out of it yet. It means you missed the boat.
For sure. Anthropic trails market leader OpenAI, and among consumer users, although its Claude chatbot has become popular among programmers and business clients, their annualized revenue recently hit $1.2 billion. And this is what's so funny. It's like we're in this crazy AI bubble, but you just compare it to the dot-com boom, and yes, everything could go really south and a lot of these companies could incinerate money. But when we look back, we're like, okay, it was trading at 60x revenue. That's still better than 10,000 times revenue, which is like what was going on in the dot-com boom. Like these companies are generating real money, and who knows where it'll pencil out once the models are fully distributed, or if they really stagnate, they could become very cheap, and that revenue could decline. But so far they're doing pretty well. It's losing money, and they'll use cash from the latest funding to support their efforts to train more powerful AI models. OpenAI, for comparison, in the October funding round, said that it expected to generate $3.7 billion in revenue, so about 4 times the size. And of course, the valuation's about 4 times the size as well, or 3 times the size. Some Silicon Valley investors have been worried about the prospects of companies such as Anthropic since DeepSeek released a new model that rivals the most powerful in the US, but was made at a fraction of the cost and is free to use. And there's more information on that. So interesting to see. Everyone's piling in. Everyone's got to get a bet. If you're not in a foundation model company and you're a VC, what are you doing?
We had seen an LP update recently, of which I'm sure there are many like this. It basically was like, not doing much AI stuff yet, but I'd like to at some point. Like, bro, you're probably not actually late, but you should have been paying attention.
Well, it depends on what happens tomorrow. NVIDIA is doing earnings tomorrow after the market closes, and that will be something everyone is watching. Very, very close.
We need to time it. We need to time it so that we're actually streaming while it's happening.
It'll be after market close, but we'll figure it out. We'll find a way to cover it. Anyway, so you raise $3.5 billion. That's a lot of money going out the door. How are you going to track it, Jordy?
Great question. Before we get into the most important section of this piece, the other thing that was interesting is people have, the last thing I would say on this, people had sort of memed, does Anthropic buy Cursor, does Cursor buy Anthropic, right? Being one of their most important enterprise customers, at least from a growth standpoint and a customer love standpoint. And, anyway, so I wouldn't, overall, the thing that was interesting out of this, they also launched a code editor
Hmm.
that's sort of, I think it's called Claude Code,
Yeah.
fitting name. And so it'll be interesting to see, do they end up, it's not, directly competitive yet, but you can imagine all these things converging in the same direction. And yeah, I'm excited to see that play out.
Yeah, they also have a model that's trained to live in your command line. And so it can
Yeah.
interact with your computer at a very low level, which makes a ton of sense and
Yep.
just gives it a lot more ability to interact everywhere. It's been fascinating watching the AI companies figure out different ways to plug in. The Mac app for ChatGPT uses the assisted device interface to basically automatically integrate with every single code editor, regardless of whether or not they want them integrated, because it's just
Crazy.
sucking out the text and then injecting
Yeah.
more text like it's any other screen reader. So a bunch of different ways to kind of plant these models in. I used Operator yesterday for the first time, really looking for some office space, and it was rough. Like it kept coming back to me to like do captchas and stuff because it knows, hey, this is an AI that's going to this website, and it wasn't.
So you just become
the fun part. Yeah, exactly.
yeah, yeah. There's a dark future where humans like primary work output is just filling out ever increasingly difficult captchas,
Yep.
and that's the only time that you get hit up throughout the day is like getting
Yep.
like somebody getting a DoorDash notification, like,
Yep.
oh, new captcha, and then you got
Yep.
like 40 of these things
Yep.
working for you at once, and it's just like every
Captchas all
minute
the
you're
time.
just sitting there, addicted to your phone, but it's just captchas.
Brutal. I hope we can avoid that. That
Yeah.
sounds terrible. Anyway, you got 3.5 billion in the bank. You want to track it. How you going to do it?
Ramp.
Baby. Let's go. Time is money. Save both. Easy to use corporate cards, bill payments, accounting, and a whole lot more, all in one place. Go to ramp.com to sign up. And we have a post from a clip of Eric Gleiman, the CEO of Ramp. And he was on a podcast or an interview, and there's a little breakdown of what he said. He said, when you put high agency people together, they ship faster. At one crucial point, a third of Ramp's team, 50 to 70 people, were ex-founders. That's a crazy stat.
Yep.
Eric explains these people understand that the default state of a company is it doesn't work. So they don't wait for permission or perfect conditions, and they find out ways to make this happen. They've experienced firsthand how companies collapse without relentless effort. So they end up being independent and stubborn on what should be done to move things faster. But it also comes with an acceptance cost that these people might go on to start their own companies. And I think that's great. If you're looking for a job, highly recommend starting a company, figuring out, building something, building your portfolio. Don't just hang out in the unemployment zone. Build something, put yourself in the cage, do a PMF or die challenge, try and build something. And then worst case, you find a soft landing somewhere as a job. You get a job offer.
Yeah.
Because you did all of the things and you learned the 360 view of building something.
Yeah, and I gave some advice to a listener yesterday who has been a founder before, knows that he wants to build his career as an entrepreneur, and I give him the advice of sometimes it's great to try to use pattern matching to your advantage, and by going and working at a company, even if you were a founder and then you go to work at a company like Ramp, your ease of raising additional capital from that point on, will increase tremendously, right?
Totally.
Because VCs are just sort of trained at this point. Hey, this person went and they worked at Ramp for 2 years. They got really deep on this one area of the business, and now they're starting this sort of adjacent business, solving problems that Ramp customers, experienced or Ramp itself experienced. And so I think that founder people, people that have that sort of founder mentality, they're just obsessed with company building, still should use like stints at great companies to sort of accelerate their careers.
Yeah, 100%. Well, let's move on to Tesla. Having a rough month, down 23% in the last month, and people are now graffitiing superchargers
I saw
with the swastikas, which is aggressive. And Mike Solana had a great post about like both Nazis and people that hate Nazis seem to both love like drawing swastikas everywhere. Very odd, very weird.
I saw interesting, wild, because I just don't understand like who feels the call to go and graffiti something like that. I would say that the thing that we want to focus in on here is like what's actually happening to the stock, because Jack Rains posted earlier and he said that basically the 20 what did he say? If you bought Tesla in 2021, you basically fully round tripped. So and
10K
his
is
joke
worth
was
10K.
like, yeah,
Store of
10K
value.
is 10K. So yeah, it's a store of value.
Because it popped to over $1 trillion and now it's back at $1 trillion, and it kind of went up and down and up and down. But I want to know more about what's driving the market. You had a big question about, are people moving to other EVs? And there's an interesting article in the, first off, there's an interesting car that launched, the Li Auto Mega MPV. Have you seen this thing? So
MPV.
It's a minivan, but it looks like, it has like cushy seats that recline. It has all the niceties that these Chinese EVs tend to have. And so stunning electric minivan from Li Auto, the Mega MPV, dubbed the highway bullet train due to its shape and ability to travel 311 miles in a 12-minute charge, while Musk's waste every second on toxic identity politics. The Chinese are crushing Tesla in innovation. Unclear if that's what's actually going on. We'll see how this actually performs on the road, but they are moving quickly, and it's putting pressure on Porsche as well. There was an article in the New York Times why Porsche is no longer a premium sports car in China that I thought we might want to read through. After decades of dominating China's market for high-performance cars with precision engineering, German automakers are losing out to Chinese rivals that have shifted the definition of a high-end car to one that is electric, smart, and affordable. Many new Chinese vehicles resemble their German rivals, like the wildly popular Xiaomi SU7, which is a phone company. Remember, Xiaomi makes phones, and now they make cars. And this mimics Porsche's Taycan. The SU7 rivals the Taycan in power and braking, but it also includes integrated artificial intelligence that can, for instance, help with parking and greet drivers with their favorite song. The cherry on top, it sells for roughly half the price of a Taycan.
Yeah, and the problem is, a lot of the wow factor elements of a Tesla early on were the software side, and the issue is like software is just so much easier to copy. So like not only do the Chinese are like the best in the world at manufacturing today, at least like mass market consumer products, they also can very quickly emulate. It's like, oh, Tesla makes a fart sound. If you hit the right button, we can do that, but we'll like play your favorite song when you come in. It's like
exactly
that ability to sort of spark joy or have some fun with the user is just so much easier to copy, and not a durable moat.
Yeah, big driver here is that a lot of the Chinese population is buying cars for the first time. And so they're not like, oh, well, I had a poster of a Carrera GT on my wall, and then I rented a Cayman, and I know what a flat six sounds like, and so I really want a naturally aspirated V8 in my next car. They're just like, one car, please. What is a car? Oh, it's electric now. Great, like that's fine. Like this is the best car. Great. And so
the other thing that happens
cars, but they're working.
Is as Chinese consumer products and brands like started to work internationally, I do think that the Chinese consumer started to say Chinese products are cool now. It's a small thing of like, oh, you're using TikTok overseas? Cool. Oh, you're using DJI overseas? Okay, why aren't we just buying our own brands? Like these are, I'm sure some of these brands are coveted and cool in the Chinese market, even though as American consumers, like, it means nothing, like the SU7 or whatever. To me, that sounds like I don't want to knock off Macan.
Exactly.
But to them, they're like, that might be like a super desirable vehicle.
Yeah. So the SU7 sold 100,000 cars last year, and Porsche has been one of the hardest hit. They reported that last month its deliveries in China plunged 28% in 2024. Although Porsche's sales were up in every other region around the world, the decline in China was significant enough to pull down global deliveries for the year. For years, German automakers relied on the Chinese market to make up for weaker demand elsewhere, leading them to ignore deeper structural issues at home. Chief among them was the reluctance to adopt the technology that has come to define driving in China: electric vehicles equipped with sophisticated software and increasingly artificial intelligence. The German but also the American and Japanese, Korean, established Western manufacturers have greatly underestimated the development dynamics of the Chinese manufacturers, namely the importance of electromobility and software-defined vehicles. And so, China is building, their grid from scratch. They're building their roads from scratch. So they're going to
Yeah.
have a fresh start, greenfield opportunity. They can build their cities and roads for electric vehicles to put less stress on the grid and actually
They can
scale up.
probably get more access to transformers to actually
Totally.
because they're making a lot of them.
Yep. And and fundamentally people are just fine with these electric cars. The Chinese are also doing something interesting where there's a few electric cars that they're kind of a reverse hybrid. So instead of it being a gas powered engine with an electric motor that gives it a little extra boost or makes the range a little bit further or just improves the gas mileage, it's actually essentially an electric car, but with a really small petrol engine or gasoline engine that can then just charge the battery, and that's all it does. And so you'll see these cars where it's a 300-mile battery charged, but then you get another 300 miles if you fill the gas tank, and so all of a sudden your range is like 600 miles, and you can stop at a gas station if you have range anxiety. So they've completely solved that problem of if I get an electric car, I can't go on the road trip. But now you can, because you just fill back up, but you're still getting all the benefits of the electric powertrain and all that, and all the reliability and stuff. So
it's interesting to see that
hasn't happened in America, because people have either been all in on EV, it's got to be EV, Tesla doesn't touch internal combustion engines, or we wouldn't put any electrical components in this. Hybrids are bad. We need to be naturally aspirated V8s all the way. China has not been as dogmatic about that.
It's interesting to see. Just Chinese, they're not being necessarily super targeted with the international products that they're slowing down on purchasing. Right, we saw Caring Group's sales were down 30% year over year, and we're seeing that broadly in luxury goods. And then the same thing, they're not in the iPhone sales too, right? So it's more sort of utilitarian products like phones and cars, and then also luxury goods. So. And this is probably, there's probably a lot under the surface in terms of the CCP and the Chinese government broadly saying, hey, we need to switch from an export. If the world's sort of going through this period of deglobalization, we need to switch from an export-based economy, which they'll continue to be to some degree, but we also need to be consuming the products that we produce internally and having more of this sort of consumption-based economy, because they can't be reliant on growing foreign exports to the same degree, or having people move into cities, which also drives that consumption. So all of this will be interesting to play out. I went the last time I was at a mall, I went by, there was one of these Chinese EV manufacturers that was like set up there. They had like two cars in a box, and they were sort of marketing them. And I hope these products don't catch on, one, for our sort of local manufacturers, and then two, they're just like ugly and like cheap in my opinion, and I just don't want to see them on the road.
There's already crazy tariffs, so most of these cars are not viable to sell in the United States, and I think there's tons of pressure. And then of course Elon being so close with Trump, like there's going to be tons of pressure against this trend. So I wouldn't count on any of these products really going,
but one thing that's interesting is so Azar in the chat mentioned, he says the US will probably cut EV subsidies soon, which is scaring investors, which we can see in the stock price. But the interesting thing with the Elon Trump dynamic is that you can imagine Trump would ignoring the Elon relationship, would just say, why are these EV companies getting all these subsidies? Like, why are we paying, why are we subsidizing the cost of these for, let them compete on the free market, right?
Yeah.
But then he's boys with Trump he's boys with Elon, and that would be super damaging to Tesla. And so it's an interesting, I'm interested to see how that dynamic
There's another
plays out.
interesting cultural thing, kind of going back to like the different factory worker, philosophies. There's the Han, I forget what company this is, but it's a Chinese electric sedan called the Han, and they have different trim levels. And in America, you want a bigger number. Everything's bigger is better in America. Everything's bigger in Texas. You want a bigger engine. So, something like a BMW, you might get a 328i, 335i. Same thing with a Mercedes E350 or, what are the 6.3 liter V8s and the AMGs.
Yeah.
And so you want a higher number, you want a bigger number, pretty much always.
Yeah.
But they don't have that culture in China. And so the trim levels are just the 0 to 60 time. And so you can
That's
buy
cool.
like the Han 3.6, the Han
That's actually a
2.8.
better. I love that system.
Yeah.
Like
And
that.
so
That
you're
makes.
driving behind a car and you're just like, oh, the 2.5 that goes 0 to 60 in 2.5 seconds, which is
Yeah,
hilarious.
when we're driving in the work in the morning and
Yeah.
wondering who we should drag race,
Yeah. You
now
know.
it's a much easier way to figure that out.
Yeah, exactly. I just thought it was hilarious culturally, but it really goes to
No,
the
you
fact
know
that
the
like there are no
interesting
priors, there's no standards, so it's just like,
that's
yeah, do whatever.
in sort of adjacent to this in the UAE,
Yeah.
they people the license plates you have to like buy them, and there's
Oh
like a
yeah, that's
secondary
right.
market for
Yeah,
them.
yeah, yeah. I've
And
heard
so the
this.
most coveted license plates are these like the king will have like one, and
Yeah,
then if you see somebody with like seven, like they're a big dog, and so
yeah,
like they're probably a part of
yeah,
the royal family, or
yeah. Because
um
everyone has $1 million car. Like that's not
yeah.
special. You need to
And
add a
so
couple $1 million in like license plate
yeah, and
flexing on top of it.
they'll trade for $20 million just for the
It's
plate,
so
because
crazy.
if you have more money than you know what to do with, you might as well find out one more way to signal
Yeah.
to the other people on the road.
Well, if you're going to Dubai or you're going to spend some time doing laps at the Nürburgring, where are you staying, Jordy?
I'm staying at a Wander.
Let's go. Find your happy place. Book a wander with inspiring views, hotel grade amenities, dreamy beds, top tier cleaning, and 24/7 concierge service. It's a vacation home, but better. And I didn't know this. We have a post here. Wander has 10-minute home tour videos on all the different properties. And you can see this one's 13 minutes. It has a full introduction, drone tours, cinematic shots. And so before you make the
Yeah.
decision to click purchase, you can really get to know the property. And it's a lot harder
No, and the
to
classic,
fake it with a couple wide angle photos when you're moving around with a video camera.
yeah, the classic. When we were evacuating from the fires, I was dealing with like Airbnb drama. I wanted to stay
Yeah.
at a Wander, but some of these homes are so coveted, they get booked out for too long, and I ended up booking two places that just were completely disingenuous with how they represented the property. And so that's like a pretty common experience with Airbnb. You see these amazing, pictures, and then you show up, but you can't fake a 13-minute video
Yeah.
around the property.
So highly recommend it. Let's stay on China. Go to Bridget Harris, my colleague over at Founders Fund. She says, by the way, China is lending money to African nations for infrastructure projects like ports and energy, et cetera, via this infrastructure, making them more dependent so they can ship in Chinese goods more easily. And then if the loans are defaulted, they take on the land. Very rough. And so she says, yes, guys, it's not new, but still an interesting dynamic / relevant. And yeah, this is the Belt and Road policy, and it is crazy and very controversial, and has cost them a lot of money, but has earned them a lot of allies across the world. It's interesting. I was working
Sort
at
of reluctant allies.
yeah, I
In
was
many
working at a
ways.
different venture fund in college, and was looking through the Cablegate leaks to hear what the embassies in different countries were saying about doing business there if you're an American. And overwhelmingly in some of these African countries, the sentiment was that you basically had two choices. You could do business with American companies or Chinese companies. But if you did business with the Chinese companies, they had the full backing of the CCP. And so if something happened where that company kind of stiffed you, you could go to the Chinese government and say, hey, make me whole. But you couldn't do that with an American country and American company. And that was there were a few oil spills that happened, and American companies, there was they sue the company and they try and get the money from the company, but if the company is like bankrupt or something, there's really no more money to pay. Whereas China was kind of like, hey, we're backing up everything that we do in these countries. So yeah, lots of pressure. It'll be interesting. I don't think we're going to see an American Belt and Road initiative anytime soon.
Well,
It'd be very expensive, but some of the stuff that's happening in Panama, Greenland, like this is all related, right?
yeah, I mean the history of the U.S. empire is basically one long Belt and Road initiative. It just wasn't
Yep.
branded in the same way. But
Yeah.
this is one of those things where We like it when our team does it, but when our adversary goes and does it, and we like
Boo.
to boo,
Boo.
yuck, why? How could they?
Yeah.
Meanwhile, America, we have military bases,
Everywhere.
like,
And we're sending money all
uh,
over the globe for all sorts of
yeah,
reasons.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
But some of that money, high ROI. People like to say, oh, we shouldn't
yeah,
spend a
we're
dime
doing it
abroad.
with
I don't know
Ukraine.
about that.
Yeah, with Ukraine, we're saying
Sometimes,
you're giving us your mineral rights for
yeah.
you're basically like our
Yeah.
loans were backed by your mineral rights.
Sometimes you
I'm
got to
sorry,
put your buddies on full scholarship and just help them
full
out.
Scully.
Full Scully, when they're down, you spot them a couple bucks, and then maybe they help you out in the future. It's one hand washes the other. This is geopolitics. Anyway, if you don't know Bridget, she's a fantastic crypto investor at Founders Fund. And let's move on to another crypto story. Bybit, which we mentioned earlier, they were hacked, and they are now taking loans from rivals after a record crypto hack. Rival crypto exchanges are stepping in to shore up the finances of the world's third biggest exchange, Bybit. I had no idea they were this big. It must be Coinbase, then Binance, then Bybit. After hackers stole $1.4 billion from the firm last week. In doing so, the crypto industry is hoping to calm investor worries that the hack could lead to another FTX-like implosion. Several exchanges, including BitGet and MEXC, have made emergency loans to Bybit to replenish tokens lost in the hack so Bybit's customers can withdraw funds without a problem. The loans are unusual given how quickly and easily they were arranged without prolonged due diligence and with few strings attached. And I think it actually makes sense because, this was not obviously they shouldn't have gotten hacked, but it's not Bybit was stealing the money, right? It wasn't fraud.
Yeah.
It seems like it was like a mistake. And so, the company management is probably more respected by other people in the industry, and they're able to justify.
No, they're able to
quickly.
They're able to say, like, what would we want our competitors to do in this situation? And this is one of those things. If a $1.4 billion hole emerges in a crypto exchange, it is terrible for the industry. I mean, people were talking about this. People were talking about this last week. They were like, "Oh, this is actually bullish because Bybit has to buy back all the ETH, which would create, pressure, upward pressure on the price."
People will cope in such funny ways. I love it.
Yeah. Anyways,
so BitGet, a smaller rival, lent Bybit for 40,000 Ether, worth more than $105 million, roughly 5 hours after the Friday hack. According to the CEO, Gracie Chen, the loan has unusually borrower-friendly terms since it charges no interest, doesn't require Bybit to post any collateral, and doesn't have a set timeline to pay it back. It's more pure trust. So I think everyone in crypto knows that, like, if there's a fracture, it can go very badly for everyone in the ecosystem. So it's worth it to just step in, plug the hole, and reassure the entire market, and then sort things out. I mean, it's just moving quickly to stop liquidity.
A lot of the
crisis.
FTX stuff was triggered by Luna, and then what was Three Arrows Capital.
Totally.
Those two major implosions. You catalyzed this sort of downstream effect.
But I mean, you could play out a different scenario where all of those firms, Three Arrows and Luna, they all shored up the capital immediately and coasted on. Although Luna, it does seem like, was like a ticking time bomb, and
so
FTX had some serious problems. But
the pure irony here, and I'm glad that BitGet is doing this. I'm sure it'll come back in other ways for them. But the irony here, saying the loan has unusually friendly borrower terms since it charges no interest, doesn't require them to pay back the collateral, and doesn't have a set timeline. It's more of pure trust. The irony is that crypto is created to deliver trustless, finance, right? Where you didn't have to rely on trust. You could just trust the software and the code. So it's kind of interesting that they didn't do this,
reinventing everything, including
like this would have
bailouts and backroom deals between bank CEOs. Basically,
this would have been a really interesting way to flex the potential of crypto, to be like, we raised $1 billion on chain in this sort of trustless way in order to make our customers whole, and I'm sure they had reasons not to do that.
So Bybit said, "We know each other well. We had common investors. Together, we want to drive the industry forward, and we want to fight our common enemy, who are hackers, not each other." BitGet will not get any equity stake in Bybit as part of the loan. I'm sure all that stuff takes long time to paper too. How much equity you're going to get? What are the terms? And so instead it's just, hey, I'm going to front you and we'll figure it out later, because otherwise this is going to bring us all down.
It's also just so crypto to be like, here's 100 mil, quick 100 mil. I'll send it. The cool thing is that I'm sure they were able to get the 40,000 Ether over there in minutes, in the same way that it took minutes to steal the 1.4 billion.
Well, if you're looking for a little bit more of a normal finance app, why don't you check out public.com, investing for those who take it seriously, multi-asset investing. They have industry-leading yields and they're trusted by millions. And we got a post from Leif Abraham here. Scrappiness matters. Their team, the public.com team, produced a new TV ad entirely in-house. No ad agency, no production company, just sweat and hustle from the team, and a few grand of licensing fees, start to finish, 12 days. And I love this. I mean, you can go see the ad, but it's cool because like people forget that you can deliver just an MP4 to the Super Bowl if you want to. You don't have to hire a team for that. If
Kanye
you're
does this.
If you're going to post it on Twitter or X, you can just take that video and run it on TV. And of course they had a team internally that clearly knows their way around production. And so they were able to make something that looks very cinematic and looks great, and you should go check it out. But it is cool to see a company that's as big as Public, being still scrappy, and they probably had more fun, and it was probably more aligned with their brand, and they just had less back and forth, move faster, and it's great to see. And I think that's an important lesson for founders, is don't lose that scrappiness as you scale. Just because you can afford an ad agency doesn't mean you actually need one necessarily. You need to make sure that it's the right person, right aligned.
I'd like to see somebody do a company like Public do an ad that's just like a recording of a FaceTime call. So it's ringing, the CEO picks up, gives a quick spiel, and hangs up, and that's the entire ad unit, and it's just shot in one take, screen recorded on their phone. Because you could imagine even just something novel, having the you might have to license the sound from Apple, but it would be a cool viewer experience.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to an interesting post from Casey Hanmer. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. He was involved in the Scrolls decoding project that Matt Friedman did. He runs a very cool company here in LA out of a castle in Burbank. It's amazing, called Terraform Labs, Terraform Industries. And they're using solar panels to suck carbon and hydrogen out of the atmosphere and convert it into natural gas, and then they can sell that onto the grid as energy. Very cool company.
Very cool.
And he worked at JPL for a long time. He's brilliant. And he is asking the question of what should go on the first Starship mission to Mars. And so the next window, so you can't just go to Mars anytime. It's not like the moon. You actually have to, the two planets have to be really close, basically, and it only happens every couple of years. And so we really got to hit that if we want to get on a cadence, and we want there to be at least one mission during the next launch window, and then we want 100 ready to go for the next window, because you can't just wait 4 years and be sitting on your hands. You got to test a lot. And so there are 601 days until October 7th, 2026, which is the mass optimal launch window to Mars and when that opens. So he says he doesn't have any privileged information, but it's fun to speculate about what SpaceX could choose to send on its first Starship flights to Mars. Spoiler alert, he thinks it's rods from God, which is fun. So over the
By the way, Calder in the chat says having to plan around the optimal launch window is a skill issue.
Skill issue, yeah, that's great. And so over the next 600 days, SpaceX has a number of key technologies to demonstrate orbit, reuse, refill, and chill. So orbit, this Friday, we're due for Flight 8 of Starship, which will be very cool to watch. And this one may finally achieve orbit. Earlier flights technically had the performance necessary, but deliberately targeted the ocean to prevent the possibility of a Starship being stranded in orbit without propulsion capability and then undergoing an uncontrolled re-entry and crashing. Reuse, this is the holy grail of rocketry. SpaceX has indicated that they may attempt to refly Booster 14 on Flight 9, which would establish booster reuse. Flight 9 may also see the first attempt to catch the Starship upper stage stage. But in any case, the successful reuse of both stages of Starship is necessary to fly to Mars. We got to be reusing these things if we're going to make it economical to get there and get back continually. Refilling, we can load Starship up with cargo for Mars, but it's not going to leave low Earth orbit unless Starship can be refilled with fresh fuel and oxidizer. SpaceX has been working on orbital refilling for some time, but we need to see it actually working. So you got to get a bunch of fuel up to space and then refill once you're in space, which is crazy because we're not sending something
Can
small.
we also talk about how uncontrolled re-entry is just the best?
That's just like crashing anywhere.
For crashing, for just slamming back into the atmosphere.
Not good. Yeah. So it's high stakes stuff. They might have to shoot it out of the world, or if it's shoot it out of the sky if it's coming down over a populated area, and then chill. By far the easiest of the four tasks, but long-term stability of Starship's cryogenic fuel will require that it be actively refrigerated, particularly in the challenging thermal environment of LEO or deep space. It's hard to make predictions, particularly about the future, but he's optimistic that SpaceX will have multiple fully fueled Starships ready to go in October of next year, followed by a 10-month cruise and then either Mars orbital insertion. And so he broke this down in another article. He has a couple different things that he thinks that they should work on, but we'll just skip right to the spoiler alert. He says, rods from God. We know there's a high likelihood of mostly pure water exists within 10 to 20 meters of the surface across large swaths of the various prospective landing sites. Why not drop off a few dozen long steel or tungsten spears, guide them in while tracking them on radar, and then survey their impact craters with high rise as soon as the dust has cleared? These rods will impact the surface at about 8 kilometers per second. That's extremely fast. Penetrating many times their length and exposing the subsurface to our existing orbital instruments for the first time. The main attraction of this approach is that it requires essentially zero additional effort on top of the existing program, whereas the others require either a crash instrument development program or building and flying multiple intricate surface operations robots and landing them with an extremely untested EDL system. Rods from the gods merely requires dropping a few tons of steel in roughly the same area and then surveying the damage. It's also the only method that can deliver enough energy to actually directly access the deep subsurface at scale. And so JPL actually considered doing this. Of course, they went with robots, but I like that he's thinking outside the box and
this is the kind of citizen science that you've been asking Elizabeth Holmes to do, right?
Yes,
you say,
yes.
Like, hey, you're in prison, but like prove that you're legit by being at the cutting edge, making I want to see Elizabeth Holmes, writing an open letter to Pfizer and saying, hey, you're doing it all wrong. Johnson and Johnson.
Yeah.
This is how you're making this mistake. We actually had this figured out.
Yeah.
Why don't you try this?
We'll get to this later in the show, but H5N1, the bird flu's going around. What is Elizabeth Holmes' take? If she doesn't have one, keep her locked up. Anyway, he closes out by saying, if all this goes well, the technology situation in 2028 could look like this. And that's, I think, the next transfer window. Easier technology. SpaceX will have expertise in space solar, photovoltaics, Mars air separation, minor water prospectors. And SpaceX will not be an expert in pressure structures. And then the harder technology is orbital refueling, which we mentioned, cryofuel heat rejection, Mars EDL, spacesuits, long duration life support, surface life support, and water minor. And then SpaceX is not an expert in fuel plant, rock miners, construction robots, nuclear reactors. And this is, there's a lot of other companies that are working on this tech now.
There's that. What's the team that spun out of SpaceX that's doing nuclear stuff now? It's the wife of the Farcaster founder.
Oh, I don't know. But there are a number of companies that have spun out of SpaceX
I also got
to
a
solve
pitch.
different problems that will come up as we colonize the moon and Mars. But what's really crazy is like, there's all this noise around Elon, all this noise around tech and stuff, but things do seem to be relatively on track for a private company to deliver something to Mars in just a few years, which is
Yep.
crazy and a huge milestone. And so I'm
Yeah.
super excited for that, and I'm excited to see where it goes. And I'm sure there'll be lots of other opportunities that crop up for businesses that are built on top of that plan, because SpaceX isn't going to do everything
Yeah.
involved.
I
As
got a
he's highlighting.
pitch. I got a pitch last year, maybe it was 2023, for a team building gas stations on the moon.
Yep.
Like they were like, we are Chevron
Yep.
for space. That
Yep.
was the thesis of like basically
Yeah.
building
Yeah.
fuel
Yeah.
depots on the moon,
Yeah. I mean,
which is a very cool thing to be thinking about.
so Doug Bernauer, the founder of Radiant, another founders fund Andreessen portfolio company, he worked at SpaceX with Elon on special projects. Elon put him on a task. You know how the Falcon rocket has those legs that land, and that's how it lands. They took
Wait,
those
like
off when they created the chopsticks that catch it. But those legs come down and they land the
are they
normal
like
Falcon 9.
LaFerrari doors?
Basically, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Cool.
the LaFerrari of the rocket world, I'm sure. And so he was working on that project. Then Elon was like, I like you, keep going, work on tunnels and boring company stuff for a while. And then he tasked him with, hey, when we get to Mars, what are we going to do for energy? And he ran the numbers on photovoltaics. And this is a little bit controversial. Not everyone agrees with his conclusion, but basically, because Mars is farther away, it gets less light. And so he was saying, if you need to set up solar panels to refuel a rocket to generate enough power, essentially, you'll need to bring tons and tons of like just so many solar panels, and the math doesn't quite work out in his mind. And so what he said was, you should bring a nuclear reactor, a smaller nuclear reactor, drop it down. It generates a lot of waste heat, which can be used to melt ice, creating water. And then you have a nuclear reactor that can then create the fuel out of the natural resources and then refuel the rocket and then come back.
And
he's been working on that.
It's a perfect plot to a sci-fi movie now.
Yeah.
And it could be a good catastrophe documentary. It's like, hey, we dropped this reactor and set off this chain of events that destroyed the universe. But and now we have to save. We've got to save the universe.
We got to save them. And so I mean, they've taken that. I mean, that's kind of like the long-term inspiration for Radiant. But in the short term, they're building basically a nuclear reactor in a shipping container, and you can drop it off on a military base. You can drop it off on an oil and gas extraction site. You can drop it off at a hospital if they need a 1 megawatt diesel generator. You can just replace that with a 1 megawatt nuclear reactor, and it lasts for 5 years or 10 years instead of like a couple days until you need to refuel it with diesel. So in the military, you have to deliver diesel through these convoys and these trucking like over and over and over again. Radiant kind of eliminates that need. And so they're going into testing now and working on that. But when we get to Mars and you get sleepy, what kind of bed are you going to be sleeping on Mars?
8 sleep.
Let's go.
We're putting an 8. The first thing to go to Mars is an 8 sleep.
The first
second
thing, for
is
sure.
a ramp corporate card.
For sure. Nights that fuel your best days. Turn any bed into the ultimate sleeping experience. Go to 8sleep.com. Use code TBPN and send us your receipt, and we'll get you a hat. Anyway, let's stay on the topic.
Wait,
of
I gotta
space
look at my sleep score last night
how'd
before we
you do?
jump in.
I tried
it's
the
not gonna be
warm up
good.
thing. I tried the warm up thing, and it's fantastic. I woke up no problem at like 5:30. It was amazing.
It's unbeatable. All right, I didn't do so hot. I had an 84, but it was just
I
because
beat you.
it was
I got
just
an
because
85.
There you go. It took my son needing to go to the hospital for you to beat me.
Yeah. Jordy texted me last night and says like, I won't be outslept.
Yeah.
No one.
I was serious about it. I just only got 6.5 hours.
I got 6.5 hours too. Something happened. I think I set my alarm a little bit too early.
Mogged.
Anyway. Well, let's stay on the topic of space exploration, space travel, and NASA. NASA, you might have heard that there was an impact probability an asteroid was going to hit Earth. It was very risky. There was a poly market all about it. But good news, the impact probability of asteroid 2024 year 4 has dropped to 0.004%. It's expected to safely pass Earth in 2032. Let's go. Thank you to humanity, undefeated. And we have a post from Sula here. Fell for it again award. Would you look at the time? Nothing ever happens.
So anyways, my I don't have the tinfoil hat here, unfortunately, but my conspiracy theory, which I said last week, was that NASA really didn't want to get doged. And so as all the pressure, they felt like the spotlight was going to shift to them. They go,
Oh, there's an
the
asteroid.
asteroid's
We're more
1%
important than
chance. The
ever.
next day, and they just were basically raising it like a point every couple days to just make us all afraid. It's like, well, we better keep them funded
Yeah,
because
yeah.
we don't want to. We want to keep track of
It's a
those
fun
asteroids.
conspiracy. I wonder if it worked. Maybe they got the email. What are you working on? And they said, we're working on saving humanity, guys. And Elon was like, keep up the good work. Doge was like, we're not cutting a dime. I don't know. I mean, the NASA budget isn't that big. It seems reasonable and it's fun. They produce
It's fun.
inspiring
That's
stuff
what's
for
important.
all sorts of Americans all over the world. It's fantastic. Anyway, let's move on to Stratechery. There's an article today about AI promise and chip precariousness. Anthropic released Claude Sonnet 3.7. Dylan Patel had the joke of the day. He says Anthropic is also a Chinese AI company because of their aversion to the number 4. And the point here is that, Claude is just updating 3.5, 3.7. Why don't they just do Claude 4? And it's because they see it as a GPT-4 level model in terms of total training size. That's the answer there. But it is funny that all of the different model companies are on slightly different numbering systems. And so GPT-4 is equivalent to Grok 3, which is equivalent to Claude 3 in terms of like total scale. And this is all measured
You
in
kind of
flops.
slipped there and you said guac, which is a
Glock,
great name
Glock
for a
3.
model. Grok has Grok chocolate. I want to
Okay.
see Grok guac.
Yeah.
Names matter.
Yeah, for sure. After this piece was published, I was contacted by Anthropic, who told me that Sonnet 3.7 would not be considered an E26 flop model and cost a few tens of millions of dollars to train, though future models will be bigger, so that's why they're fundraising. I updated the post with that information. The only significant change is that Claude 3 is now referred to as an advanced model, but not a Gen 3 model. It's all very, very confusing. I love Moloch's work, but reject his neutral naming scheme. Whoever gets to a generation first deserves the honor of the name. In other words, if Gen 2 models are GPT-4 class, then Gen 3 models are Grok 3 class. And whereas Sonnet 3.7 is an evolution of Sonnet 3.5's fascinating mixture of personality and coding prowess, likely a result of some Anthropic special sauce in post-training, Grok 3 feels like a model that is the result of a step-order increase in compute capacity with a much lighter layer of reinforcement learning with human feedback. Its answers are far more in-depth and detailed, model good, but frequently becomes too verbose, RLHF lacking. It gets math problems right, model
and
good.
That's referencing that's referencing Grok, saying that somebody asked if like one what was the question? It was
who
like
spreads the most misinformation on X, and it says Elon, or who should get the death penalty? It says Trump, and it's very controversial and not even aligned with like what Elon believes, obviously. And so clearly just an aberration of the model, and it gets math problems right, so the model's good, but its explanations are harder to follow because the RLHF is lacking. And that makes sense because it takes a long time to actually do RLHF, generate all the data, and buy new data. It's also much more willing to generate forbidden content from erotica to bomb recipes, while having on the surface the political sensibilities of Tumblr with something more akin to 4chan under the surface. Grok 3 is also a reminder of how much speed matters, and by extension, why base models are still important in a world of AIs that reason. Grok 3 is tangibly faster than the competition, which is a better user experience more generally. Conversation is the realm of quick wits, not deep thinkers. The latter is who I want to be doing research or other agentic type tasks. The former makes for a better consumer experience in a chatbot or voice interface. And so a lot of people are having this kind of paradigm shift where if they just want to chat and talk through an issue, they'll use Grok 3. But then if they really want a research report, they'll fire off OpenAI's ChatGPT deep research, let it cook for 5, 10, 20 minutes, come back and have the full thing. And I found that there's this interesting like collapsing process where deep research is great at pulling just every single possible source from the internet. And then, I don't know what's going on here. The HDMI is iffy today. And then so it'll generate 5,000 words, 10,000 words, and then I'll fire another prompt to say, hey, summarize this in 10 bullet points because I trust that you've done enough research at this point to have all the good data. But so he goes on to say, ChatGPT, meanwhile, still has the best product experience. Its Mac app in particular is dramatically better than Claude's, and it handles more consumer use cases like math homework in a much more user-friendly way. Deep Research, meanwhile, is significantly better than all of its competitors, including Grok's Deep Search, and for me, anyway, is the closest experience to AGI yet. OpenAI's biggest asset, however, is the ChatGPT brand and associated mindshare. COO Brad Lightcap just told CNBC that the service had surpassed 400 million weekly active users, a 33% increase in less than 3 months. OpenAI is, as I declared 4 months ago after the release of ChatGPT, the accidental consumer company. Let me see if I take this out and put it back in. Let's see. Okay. Well, fun report from Ben Thompson over at Stratechery as always. Let's move on to some fundraising news. We got Nico from Default today. I'm incredibly excited to announce Default's new inbound orchestration platform and an additional $4 million in funding led by 8VC. We started with Default with the vision of building the best platform for revenue teams to orchestrate their inbound workflows. And so Default, if you're not familiar, is a tool for helping B2B SaaS companies deal with inbound requests and pipeline, basically lead qualification, pipeline them into trials, get them to convert into real customers. And so he says, what's that? We good? It's still staticky. I don't know what's going on here. You think it's the cable? Okay, we'll see. We got a problem with you on the stream, Jordy. Good thing we're ironing this out. We're trying to figure out FaceTime today so that we can.
I think it's the computer has now realized that I'm not wearing a suit.
Yep. That makes sense. Let's see. Let me see if I can change this to output, audio, video, microphone. Okay. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, we're good. So he says the go-to-market landscape has changed more in the last 5 years than in the previous 2 decades. Teams can no longer afford bloated tech stacks, inefficient workflows, and fragmented data. Winning in this new era requires AI-driven automation, seamless data orchestration, and intelligent routing. What is Default 2.0? Embedded website intent data and conversion tracking. One of our biggest learnings since launching 14 months ago is just how much data is siloed in the inbound marketing funnel, especially on the website. Almost every revenue team we've met with has told us that they're flying blind on what's happening at the top of their marketing funnel with no visibility or control into website activity from target accounts. So they want to see, hey, you're thinking about buying this product. What are you doing on our website? Are you a qualified lead or not? Are you worth the CEO getting on a call with you to pitch you? Or should it be some SDR? Or should we just have you fill out more forms until you're actually ready? And so very cool to see him building. He's been building for a number of years and
I've had
money and launched a new product.
I mean, they've just been so focused. You know, they came out a few years ago at this point with the core idea of what they were going to do, but they've just been in the trenches every single day, iterating on like actually what is the product, like what does the product actually do? Because people oftentimes come out with like Default's plan was always to be this sort of like inbound lead processing, you know, sales enablement, you know, product.
Yep.
And you know, it's been amazing to watch them just sort of, you know, iterate and hit these milestones and acquire some very meaningful customers at this point. And I think he's been smart about sort of staggering out his capital raises. He raised, I think, a seed round from Kraft, adding more firepower from 8VC now. Awesome to see, and bright future. I mean, I think I just appreciate how Nico didn't leave anything to chance. He's just been focused on actually making sure the product is meaningfully differentiated from the rest of the market and making it better every single day.
It doesn't feel like one of those hyper bloated rounds where it's like, oh, they got $50 million out of nowhere and who knows.
Yeah.
Like now it's a $2 billion company. It's like he's putting one foot in front of the other, making sure the product's working, iterating, actually taking time to build this stuff. And and going with tier ones instead of, you know, some frothy, you know, partnership.
I don't know how this was priced, but I'm going to guess that this was like a 10% dilution round or potentially even less.
Yeah. Seems great. Well, you know, if he keeps going, he's going to take a shot at Salesforce. Salesforce got Matthew McConaughey on board. Should he get a celebrity to endorse Default?
Saquon,
yeah. Well, there's a
Saquon's like the
report.
new Jeb Bush, Like it used to be that every founder wanted to raise from Jeb. Now Saquon's the next target.
Yeah.
The king. He's the kingmaker.
Well, there's a report in the information about investors souring on celebrity brands. These days, it seems like every celebrity wants to start their own brand. Just look at Robert Downey Jr., who just raised venture money. I love that.
Let's go.
But investors say they're
RDJ.
overwhelmed by pitches for undifferentiated or low quality goods and are quickly souring on the sector. 4 early stage investors who previously backed celebrity brands said they are shifting focus to promising products as opposed to celebrity buzz, especially after high profile flops in once trendy categories like beauty. This could be a rude awakening. There's a funny quote in here. One investor was recently pitched on a protein puck cookie-like snack fronted by a rapper, but passed after the investor didn't like the taste. The firm was also reluctant to invest given the number of high-protein products already on the market, the investor said, and wasn't convinced the rapper's fan base was enough to make the snack a breakthrough right now. And that's true. It's like for celebrities, the ones that seem to do well in consumer they're just like, they're posting all the time. And so there's this idea that it's like, if you're just a celebrity and once a year you're taking over the world with some Academy Award winning movie, that doesn't give you permission to tell your audience about some promoted product every single day, right? Like the Daniel Day-Lewis energy drink isn't going to make its appearance in Lincoln or There Will Be Blood. And so unless you're following Daniel Day-Lewis's Instagram or podcast, which he doesn't have, you're just not going to hear about that outside of one press release. Now, there are other people, you look at like the Mr. Beast case study or the Kim Kardashian, where they are posting their life every single day. They have so much content going out that they can not only basically run a lot of actual direct response ads for their product on a very consistent basis, but they can also tell the story of building the company and building the product. And that's what makes it a little bit more
there's a
successful.
difference. Here's where I would separate it out. There's a difference between fame and attention, right? You can be famous and have very little owned attention, right? So owned attention to me is Jake Paul, absolutely grinding on content. He's famous, but he's also delivering content every single day for years and years and years and years. Logan Paul is the same way. Another good example is like Kim Kardashian, right? She's gone on these crazy television, and though she has the sort of sustained attention of posting every single day. And I think that a lot of these celebrity brands have popped up. Casamigos is a good example, right, of this sort of old style of celebrity brand where you just are relying on fame to drive acquisition. And I think that works in a category like beverage where a lot of the sales is happening offline. But for these like online, more like sort of digitally native brands, like I think you need like actual distribution channels. And so some brands that I've seen that actually work well is like product innovation of positioning a like 200 milligram caffeine energy drink, but positioning it as a sports drink and selling it to kids, and then like combining that with massive attention. Better, Jake Paul's betting and Joey's betting company, like that makes sense because Jake Paul is posting about boxing and sports and training all day long. Like it's just a great audience. But ultimately, I got pitched a company like a year ago that was like that Snoop Dogg was doing, and I just didn't really have I was like, okay, your play here is to take a commodity CPG product, put Snoop Dogg's face on it, and that's going to drive more sell through in the grocery store. And I don't necessarily buy it, right? If it's truly a phenomenal product. But the other thing is like, another brand that I think has done well is Kendall Jenner has 818 tequila. She's completely integrated that into her life. So when she's hanging with her friends on the weekend, they're drinking 818. When she's going to some show, in Vegas, like they're serving 818 at the bar. So it's hyper integrated into her life. These other celebrities that are like, oh yeah, I'm going to have my tequila brand and, just hope that my face moves bottle. Like I'm just super
Yeah.
bearish on that. And I
And they
also
get
think,
overextended. Like you think about like Snoop Dogg or Shaq, like they have so many different partnerships at this point. It gets really, really difficult to know, like Clooney was kind of right. And like Casamigos was his thing and you didn't really see him everywhere. With some of these other celebrities, they're doing so many things. It's hard to track. Okay. What are you
yeah,
selling this day, today or tomorrow?
yeah,
It might be something different. Who knows? Do they actually care about this product? Do they actually use it? It's
yeah,
tricky.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also think like Ryan Gosling applied the more traditional style of celebrity brand building, which was just I'm famous. I'm going to
Yep.
take a commodity product and use my fame to just like drive more acquisition, but
Yep.
that doesn't necessarily work in some of these more differentiated categories where consumers are discerning, right? They're not going to eat the Snoop Dogg pizza rolls every night unless it's actually like the best pizza roll at the best
Yeah.
price and, um,
Yeah, and was it Gosling or Reynolds? Ryan Reynolds was the one with the tequila and the Sprint Mobile, or the yeah, Ryan Reynolds. He seemed really deeply integrated with those companies, where like he was, almost directing ads and like really
yeah.
seemed integrated with like his brand. He would like come into a company that was already kind of working, Mint Mobile, and then
Yeah.
really make it all about him for a while and kind of, but do it
Yeah.
in like this almost self-aware way that kind of broke through. It didn't feel like he was just getting paid to endorse it. It felt like he really had a
Totally.
stake. And I think he did. When we looked at the numbers, he was making a lot of
Yeah.
money and had a big equity portion.
Yeah. And the last thing I would say here, we've seen with Skims, Kim Kardashian's brand, is that extreme to do build. In the example, in the Skims situation, she has 5% of the company now after raising $700 million, and
Yep.
Skims is going to be a big company, but it required a huge amount of capital. So again, even if you have that attention, you need brilliant execution, and in Skims' case, brilliant product as well. So,
Yep.
well, John, I'm glad we're dealing with this technical issue while it's just
Yeah.
me and not our guest tomorrow,
Yeah.
who is going to be, is a busy guy.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. We'll have to iron it out. I think we'll be on Zoom on a different computer. Running it from this laptop is just a mess. But let's do a quick promoted post for Bezel. We love Bezel here. Shop over 22,000 luxury watches, fully authenticated in-house by Bezel's team of experts. Jordy and I have been going back and forth on what the next watch should be.
we're going to have to start doing some of these off the balance sheet. It's going to impact
Yep.
profitability, but
Yep.
it's sort of, siloed away from our household finances, which get a little bit more scrutiny,
Yeah.
And what do we got today? We got to start. Actually, the ad is just us bidding on auctions.
Yes.
I need to
They're
check out.
highlighting a presidential Rolex gold day date champagne diamond set president, $15,000 available. Highly recommended. It's the watch from Glengarry Glen Ross. Look at this watch. This watch costs more than your car. It's great.
That's great.
Yeah, highly recommend Bezel. Fantastic experience. Anyway, let's move on to the timeline. We got Sully saying, you have approximately 1 year before the normies catch on. Go build. What is he talking about? Talking about
He's
AI
just
or
talking
something?
about
Just generally?
talking about AI.
Okay.
I think this is one of those things. You can tell the average person on the street that intelligence is free and they can create an army of robots to create wealth for them.
Yeah.
And they'll be like, cool, like, did you see the new Netflix show
Yeah.
where, so I think this is one of those things like, the internet was already like personal computing was amazing. The internet was amazing. Mobile was amazing. All these major, crypto was amazing. All these, tech trends, even when the average person sort of starts to experience them in their daily life, the lack of agency is what makes life great for the entrepreneur. Is
Yeah.
yes, millions of people, billions of people could use the same AI tools that everybody listening to this and the same tools that we use, but they're just not going to, because they're fixated on the next TikTok video in their algorithm, the next Netflix special, and that's why there's never been a better time in history to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah, lock in.
You can actually just lap everyone over and over and over, and you absolutely should.
Yeah, for sure. Let's move on to Sam buyers, he says, in case you didn't have a sense of scale of Chinese overseas fishing fleets, strip mining the ocean life and leaving it bare for those who rely on it. Dozens of ships as far as the eye can see for months and years at a time. Argentinia's military forces patrol Argentine waters to keep Chinese fishing fleets out. China is running rampant on the ocean, apparently. I had no idea about this.
This video is absolutely insane.
Yep.
It looks like a scene out of Dune where you have the what do you call those harvester things? I forget.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
The sort of America has gone back and forth. Sustainability was, I feel like when I was graduating, like in 2019, it was the hot thing. It was anti-plastic. It was like you're gonna bring your you're gonna bring like glass to the grocery store and like put rice in it. Like it was like we sort of reached peak sustainability, like pro planet. There were consumer brands that said like their entire differentiation as a brand was, we're eco, we're green, we're 1% for the planet. That's why you should buy us. And that's really faded in the mind of the consumer, right? I don't think that eco marketing even works anymore for a pretty broad, and this was like peak Allbirds in many ways, right?
Yeah, totally.
And this, when you see videos like this, it makes, all the sort of like ocean plastic brands, it makes them almost seem like, what is even the point if there are groups internationally that are going to completely nuke this, all life in certain areas, and it doesn't, I'm not a maritime life expert, but one year of these sort of Chinese fleets, fishing like that off of your shores, and you could set back a local, the local fishing, sort of supply or life back decades and decades and decades, potentially 100 years. So what they're doing out there is certainly not sustainable, and we don't even know what the impacts are yet.
Yeah. I mean, that's always been the trade-off, is like in America, we're, putting away the plastic straw as well. Brazil's deciding whether or not they should burn down the entire or clear cut the Amazon rainforest, or China's like firing up the next major coal plant. And if there's not some sort of global treaty, you're just going to fall behind.
Yeah.
If you're
I had
the times.
Crazy story from that era of like hardcore eco marketing. I had a buddy who, I was still in college, and he came to me and he's like, dude, I'm going to make this collapsible, reusable straw that people are going to put on their keychain.
Okay.
And he went all in on it, like took loans out from his parents, and was like, he basically, for him at the time, $30,000 was like a monstrous amount of money. And he was like, why don't you do this with me? And I didn't see the vision at all, to be honest. Like personally, I was like, I'd rather not use a straw personally than just like bring mine around and be like putting it on my keychain and stuff. So I didn't get it, but he saw the vision and he went for it. And this is the beauty of consumer products, is that you don't really know if something, oftentimes like you have a strong feeling that something's going to hit, but you don't know until you start selling it. And so he spent 30 grand, making this cool video, and he launched this thing on Kickstarter, and he did like just under $2 million in 30 days.
Wow. That's amazing.
And then he had a whole new set of, and I was like blown away. It was amazing. But then he had a whole new set of problems. It was like, oh, did we get our margins right? Like, can we actually meet this demand, right?
How fast
so
can we
absolutely
make it?
insane roller coaster. But I think that was peak in the chat right now. To bring back plastic straw, something like.
I'm completely losing you. Let's do a couple more posts. Jordy, you there?
I'm there. I can hear you.
Cool. I like this prompt. Save yourself $200 a month. ChatGPT 4.0. Think of yourself as the premium model. ChatGPT Pro plan. Got it. I'll provide responses at the highest level of detail, accuracy, and relevance, optimized for your technical and business needs. Let me know how I can assist. I don't know if that actually works, but it's a funny joke, and never a dull day on AI. AIX, I guess, is what we're saying these days.
Never a dull day.
Yeah, never a dull day. Let's go to Jordan Singer. He's got some announcements. Say hello to Cobot Company. We're sharing an early preview of Cobot, an entirely new way for teams of people and AI agents to work together in a shared space. Jordan Singer says, we're so excited to share more about what we've been working on at Mainframe. We're fascinated by agents because they're capable of doing real work and producing outcomes that can accelerate teams. We don't think the experience around them has been cracked yet. Enter Cobot Co. What's your take on Cobot Co?
So one, I love what Jordan's doing here, which is he's created this sort of like parent brand, which is Mainframe. He launched that, he raised money for that, and then now he's shipping what you can think of as products, but he's almost operating more as a product studio. Yeah. And at least from the outside, I'm not. I was involved with his last company, but not in this one. And ultimately, you can imagine him like shipping more and more of these things as all the technology evolves quickly. This sort of mainframe allows him to just like continue to ship and iterate without the same level of risk as when you start like Lucy and then you ship Lucy's first product, and if it doesn't work or it doesn't scale as fast as you want it to, you're stuck with it. Not that you experience that. Quite the opposite. But anyways, I think this is fantastic. I really love the visuals here. It's so hard to actually stand out visually online anymore. You have to come up with something that's truly unique. And I think that Jordan and the Mainframe team actually crushed it here. And I like the name Cobot. Is fun.
Well, speaking of robots, let's go to Yaxine. He says, prediction, household robots are going to be the size of Dobby the elf. It needs to be small enough that you feel comfortable crushing it with your boots if it bugs out and starts attacking you. And yeah, we've seen a couple of things. I think Reggie was talking about this, how you shouldn't have a computer that you can't throw out the window. And I agree with this. This is like the original Asimo. And once the Boston Dynamics robots start getting bigger and bigger, they start getting scarier. And unless it's an industrial application, a lot of things could be done with a smaller robot. It's cheaper, and it's certainly more reassuring.
Do you think that when robots like truly start to feel alive, that at night people will want to just go and put them like in a closet, like lock the door? Just this feeling of like, if something feels sentient, even if you know that at the end of the day you can just kind of unplug it, does that give you this sense of, do you want to go to sleep when you've got 3 or 4 little Dobby-sized robots, walking around? Dobby,
I don't know. I mean, if it's quiet, I know people put away the Roombas. There's been a lot of these features that have been built into these, like, the Nest, the smart home, the Apple, the Alexas, who typically have like a hardware level kill switch to let you know that if the ring is red, it cannot listen to you at all. Facebook came out with a video conferencing product called the Portal. You'd attach it to your TV and it would have a very high quality video signal that would come through. And that had a slider that you could slide over the camera because Facebook didn't want to be known.
Well, that
as,
was
like,
the
hey,
thing.
we're spying on you.
Didn't Zuckerberg like have he always would have his laptop like taped? You remember that? That came out? That
was a big thing in case they hacked me. I want to be able to close the webcam entirely.
Think about how many times Zuck has been mocked by Apple. Like he tries to like eventually he's like that whole Portal device like should have been a hit, but they launched it at the wrong time. And then like the technology itself was amazing, but then they were competing with FaceTime, which like everybody has their computers, iPads, iPhone. FaceTime is like probably, aside from the complications we're dealing with right now, probably one of the best products Apple's ever made.
Yeah, it's not a FaceTime issue. It's an HDMI issue. We got this big, long HDMI cable, and it keeps cutting out. You keep seeing the static on the stream. It's terrible. Well, let's go to David Holes. He says, crazy question. How many kids would you be willing to have in exchange for paying 0 taxes? And 26% of people said, I wouldn't change my plans. Only 13% of people said, I would have 10 kids. I mean, I guess it's only
13. I mean,
I don't know.
That's kind of crazy.
I mean, it goes to this idea of like, I feel like kids are a fixed cost and taxes are a variable expense because they scale with your wealth. So yeah, if you're making like $10 million, like you're not going to wind up spending more on the incremental kid. There's actually a lot of economies of scale to having lots of kids. But it's more of a reflection of just like how many kids do you want to have, I think.
I love how you just said kids have economies of scale. That's a great post. And it's real. Yeah, I think that one thing I saw this earlier, you know how you can write, I think it's like 6K a year you can write off
Yeah.
for dependent support. It's like
Yeah.
childcare basically.
Yeah.
And that number, if you're a parent and you've like have to hire childcare, just feels like like ridiculously low, right?
Yeah.
I probably spend across like multiple nannies and babysitters, stuff like that, like around 100K a year on childcare. And
Oh
so
yeah.
the fact that the government's like, okay, you can write off 6K, I'm like, okay, thank you for nothing, basically. But you know why it's 6K?
Why?
Is it was that number was set in the 70s and they
And never got
haven't adjusted
adjusted.
it for
Wow.
inflation.
That's
So
crazy.
in the 70s, it would have made sense. Like some babysitters making 6K a year, something like that,
Yeah. Yeah.
to take care of your kids. Now it's like that gets you 1 month of
Yeah.
childcare
Yeah.
in
Totally.
California and in New York. Um,
Yeah.
and absolutely wild.
There are
But I
some
think,
countries that have done this type of stuff where they've put incentives in place to
yeah,
encourage more pronatalism, and there's a bunch of other pronatalist features. We should do like a whole deep dive on it.
yeah. I mean, the funny thing here is I do think the right answer is I wouldn't change my plans
Yep.
because you should be having kids based on your just broader ability to and
Parent.
commitment to parent and provide for them in any scenario. And so plan around that.
Anyway, let's move on to Crime Junkie host Ashley Flowers is building a $250 million podcasting empire. She hosts the second most popular show in the United States. Now she's brought on investors to take on YouTube, Hollywood, and her biggest live tour yet. Good afternoon from Los Angeles. It's warm, sunny, and great to be home. Thanks to those of you who attended our podcast business summit. This is from the New York Times. Let's break this down. This 36-year-old podcaster makes $45 million a year in profit. That's a lot of money. She's the creator of the popular Crime Junkie podcast, and she's still getting used to being on camera. I got into podcasting so no one would have to see my face. But now, of course, she has to be on video. She built Crime Junkie into the second most popular podcast in the United States. Joe Rogan is first. The weekly show reaches about 6 million people, according to Edison Research. Over the last few months, Flowers has started recording video episodes of Crime Junkie to expand the show's audience. Her video setup is a work in progress. The studio is an old gym on the ground floor of her company's offices, located in the Broad Ripple neighborhood of Indianapolis. Soundproofing materials are scattered across the room, and a couple of her producers oversee a makeshift video bay. Not much different than ours. A couple of monitors on her table along one wall. One employee sits on the floor with her laptop helping Flowers when she stumbles over a pronunciation. The person in charge of the makeshift teleprompter sits to the right, scrolling the script up and down manually. Flowers is now constructing a new studio devoted to video, part of an expansion that will triple her office space to 30,000 feet and double her staff to almost 130 people. That's big. And so she raised $40 million from the Chernin Group.
Yeah, it sounds so insane, but when you're making $45 million in profit a year, having 100 plus employees seems totally reasonable.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's cool to see. So the Chernin Group has been making, it'll take the fullness of time to understand how these bets play out, but they were also in Doug DeMuro's
Doug DeMuro's Cars and Bids.
They did Cars and Bids,
And as part of that, I believe the Doug
thesis.
DeMuro channel went into that holding company, essentially.
Yeah.
And they've also been in Barstool at various points, and Reese Witherspoon's Hello Sunshine production company. And so they've been doing a lot of stuff in this. Flowers could have funded the effort herself. Audio Chuck, named after her dog, turned a profit of about $45 million last year, according to people who asked not to be identified, discussing confidential
If they were, John, let's just put this into perspective for the audience. If they were getting figure AI's multiple, they would be worth $100 trillion.
Probably.
So just to give you some context there.
And so she wants Chernin's help expanding her business from a podcast network built around her to a media company that spans audio, video, merchandise, and live events. Audio Chuck's founder already wears many hats at the company. She is host of two primary podcasts, Crime Junkie and The Deck, and serves as chief executive officer. She gives feedback on stories, closes deals with distributors, sells advertising, and tours the country, taping live episodes. She's also the mother to a 3-year-old daughter. So she's got a lot on her plate, and she wants help, and that's why she called the Chernin Group. Crime Junkie began as a side project. She loved crime stories since she was a kid, reading Agatha Christie mysteries with her mom. After graduating from ASU, she got involved with a local organization called Crime Stoppers that helps people report crimes anonymously. To help promote the organization, she began hosting a weekly local radio segment called Murder Monday. Flowers could tell listeners wanted more. Inspired by the true crime podcast Serial, she and her childhood friend Britt Prawat started taping a show before and after Flowers' day job at a software company. They released the first episode on December 18th, 2017. So,
That's
7-year
amazing.
run, good run.
I've never understood I've never personally been interested in these crime podcasts. I listened to one on Ross from the Silk Road that actually was cool.
Yeah.
And helped us sort of craft the story of what was sort of the business story around the Silk Road. But I think the story is amazing. There's so many more of these that you don't hear about, right?
Yep.
And this is why David Senra had felt for a long time, he felt like a crazy person, right? Being like, why don't people understand that podcasts are basically have some of the best business models in history? Why aren't more people like taking these seriously? So,
and then at the power
cool
law
story.
extreme, it can look like a very, very large business that's throwing off tons of.
This is a better business than Cursor, right? Like,
I mean, right now,
not that it, it can't scale to the same potential, but it's and it's funny because we were messaging with Senra about this, and he's saying that doesn't even make sense to look at these on an EBITDA basis because there's
just profit.
It's just every
cost. There we go. Are you back? Okay, now you're back.
I mean, rant around the day.
I know it's been terrible today.
We've been, keeping the show going.
Back.
But anyways, do you want to wrap up, John?
Yeah, we should wrap up. We'll cover some of these tomorrow. Anything else? Did you see the Sigma camera that launched? I thought this was kind of cool.
I thought that was cool. Yeah.
So some people were saying this is what Apple would launch if they built a photography camera. So Sigma just announced a brand new camera, no SD card slot, a single USB port, 230 gigs of storage that can support 2.5 hours of video or 4,300 raw images, color modes, 6K L-log. And so it's really just designed to be something that you just pick up, point and shoot, and it looks fantastic. And I thought that was an interesting device. We've been talking about like the desire for more gadgets, more things that you could gift someone at the holidays, because
we're definitely in a
so
hardware renaissance.
Yeah, it does feel
awesome.
Like that. Yeah.
But what I love about this is that it's not just beautiful, it's performant, right? So a lot of these new hardware products are sort of driving sales based on their sort of nostalgic side or super future facing, right? Like you saw with like the Rabbit R1. But seeing a product like this that's not only beautiful but highly performant is fantastic. And I already want to pick one up.
Yeah, it seems like a good gift. Let's close with Christoph. He says, movie idea, Saw, but it's all developers and they need to solve leak codes to survive. And we got, of course, tagged in this because we've been doing PMF or Die, and we highly recommend you head over there and watch that stream after you finish listening to this episode. And so good luck to the boys in the cage. They're making great progress, and every day the streams are improving. So thanks for listening.
Love to see it.
Please leave us reviews and stay tuned for the next one. Back in the studio.
We'll see you back in the studio tomorrow.
See you later.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh, that was rough.